Morning, everyone. I cannot
Good morning.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning with us. I am Lisa Gubernick, VP of Membership for NCJWSTL, and my co-host, Susan Katzman, the immediate past president of NCJW. We are thrilled to have our special guest, who not only is a St. Louis treasure to the news and community, but also to NCJWSTL, Jasmine Huda. She is the third woman in a row we featured on Coffee Talk, which we mark our 1 year today. Jasmine will spend some time talking to us about how she got into broadcasting, her thoughts on Missouri and how it's seen from a national perspective, and how she got involved in NCJW. Susan and I began Coffee Talk as a way to engage our members and our non-members during a time when we couldn't be together, and we continue to bring it to you despite things opening up. Thank you to Heather, our trusty operations person, and thank you to our sponsor, St. Louis Community Credit Union. And back to Jasmine. She was born in St. Louis and attended Ladue Horton Watkins School. One of her proud teachers, Reva Davis, is on here as one of our audience members.
Oh my gosh.
Jasmine worked in national news at NPR, Fox News, KSDK, and now our local Fox 2 News. She works at 11 o'clock weeknights and then news at 5 and 9 Friday evenings. She is the winner of the Edward R. Murrow Award, a regional Edward R. Murrow Award, and regional Mid-America Emmy. She is also an honorary chair of our Back to School store. So welcome, Jasmine. Thank you for being here this morning with us. She's not used to waking up this early.
Lisa, thank you so much, Susan, Heather, everyone. Good to see you. And I do have my coffee with me, so I'm ready to
go. So our first question to you, Jasmine, is I know your parents immigrated from India and they began their marriage as an arranged one. Did that factor in when you began dating, or was the expectation different for you and your 4 siblings when it came to marriage?
It's interesting. My parents, just some background for my parents, they are from 2 small villages in West Bengal of India. So if you know where Bangladesh is, which is to the east, they're just on the border. 2 tiny villages, and they didn't have a lot growing up, and they were both orphans by the time they were children. They had an arranged marriage. My mom married my father right around the time my dad was in med school in Kolkata. And it was a big deal for my dad's family because he was the only one in the family to go that far education-wise. Wow. And they had the arranged marriage, and then they came to the United States in the 60s, and they really didn't have anything. And he was on a visa, and the reason they got to stay in the United States was they had my oldest brother, and they were supposed to go back to India, but my brother had a health condition. He had like an ear infection, but it was really serious. But by the time that had all been resolved and he got better, the immigration laws changed, and they got to stay in the United States. Yeah. So it's pretty remarkable that we're here. So anyway, fast forward, they had 5 kids. I'm the youngest of 5, and dating wasn't allowed when I was in high school. So it was, I had a big group of friends, and I did get to hang out with boys and girls, and I did get to go to prom, but like formal dating was not happening at the Hudas. So I didn't really start dating until college. And I married someone who was American, not Indian, but by the time they got to me, they were kind of like, okay, like he's not, one of my brothers married someone Indian, one of my brothers married someone Pakistani. And but by the time they got to Jasmine, they're just like, as long as she's happy. Yeah. So it was good. It was good. And they my family which is from the St. Louis area. They've really embraced me, and my parents have embraced Peter. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
That's wonderful. That's what. So your siblings broke your parents in, so you
Yeah, exactly.
Here then, it sounds like. So
Right.
you grew up in St. Louis. Can you tell us your path to broadcasting? You worked at NPR National, KSTK, Fox News, and now you're at the local Fox studio.
Yeah, exactly.
The switch from you started in radio to television.
Right. So on TV now, but my heart is still with radio. So I went to, because everyone, asked this question. I went to Ladue Horton Watkins High School, and because that's so important. But when I was in high school, I did speech and debate, and I can't speak enough highly about how awesome it was to have that experience growing up. And I went to a great high school, a great school district, and I did speech and debate. And one of the events was called radio news speaking. And what you have to do is write and deliver a 5-minute newscast. And so you've got a stopwatch, and just like the news, it has to start and finish right on time. And you had your back to the judge. And the way I prepared for these newscasts was, first of all, I'm dating myself, but we had a VCR, and I taped the evening news. So like channel 2, 4, and 5. So this is like Larry Connors, Julius Hunter days, Karen Foss, Dick Ford, maybe Mike Bush, I don't remember, Tom O'Neill. And I would also record on my boombox KWMU 90.7, because that was radio broadcast. And I feel like that was the gold standard. And it is in terms of delivery and writing. So that's how I got into National Public Radio and interested in it. And I really fell in love with it. And it's so like silly. I had these like cassette tapes, of listening to them. And that's how I got into this event. And I did very well in the event. I did very well at the state level, and I'd been recognized nationally in different other events with radio news speaking when we would go to these like field trips. So that's how I got into it. And when I was in college at University of Michigan, I got to work at the NPR member station in Ann Arbor. And that's where I got to learn how to really, I really cut my teeth there. I learned how to write copy, learned how to write stories. I eventually became a board operator. And after college, fast forward, seriously, I didn't have anything lined up after college, and it wasn't for not trying, but my very last day, I had already graduated. We were moving out of Ann Arbor. I got a response, I submitted, a bazillion resumes and tapes everywhere. NPR headquarters in Washington, DC, saw my work, and they said, would you be willing to do a phone interview? It was like the day I was moving out. And we did the interview, and they accepted me for an internship at All Things Considered in Washington, DC. And when can you be here? I can be here in, September. And my flight was September 17th or September 14th, 2001.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember having this conversation September 10th with the executive producer, 2001. And then September 11th happened, and I didn't know if I was going to make it. And eventually I did. I was there a few days late, but made it to headquarters. And so I started in radio behind the scenes at All Things Considered. And then, this is, post 9/11, nobody's hiring. It was really hard, but I was able to meet Juan Williams, who was with NPR and Fox News Channel at the time. He introduced me to the bureau chief at Fox News. And then so I was just like, I need to stay in DC, because that internship was, had a hard set out time. And I made it to Fox News after that. I didn't know what I was getting into, but that's how I got to Fox News. It was just like, at that point, it was like, do whatever you can to stay in this city so you don't have to go back home, because it's going to be harder to move, back from St. Louis to Washington. And God knows my parents wanted me back home at that point. So.
And how did you make it to then being an anchor person and being in front of the camera?
So when I was at Fox News, so if you watch cable now, it's like 24-hour craziness where you have guests who are booked.
Mhm.
That's what I did. I was a booker.
Mhm.
And it is a very busy, involved job because you're having to fill time in these segments. And at that point, I'm like, I really like this, but I didn't think I wanted to be on camera. I mean, I thought I still wanted to go back to radio, but I kind of liked what I was doing, and it was fun and it was so intense. And I put together a resume tape. So I should have brought it. But you know what a VHS tape looks like?
Yes.
I had a VHS tape and like a big beta tape where I put together, I had the makeup artist at Fox News, like early in the morning or late at night, they would do my makeup. And so there are I'm Jasmine Huda, like, at the White House, and I really was at the White House doing these stand-ups, put together a reel, sent it to small markets, because usually that's how you start off in this. You're not just going to start off at the network. I sent it to all these smaller cities like Joplin, Springfield, which was sort of out of my reach, but why not? And even St. Louis, so I could get feedback on it. And I landed in Springfield, Missouri. So I left Fox, which was hard because it was a really big city. It's like, who wants to go there and go to a place that, doesn't have all this stuff going on? But that was how I started. I started on air TV in Springfield, Missouri.
Wow. Well, you have to start somewhere, and that's
yes. And Springfield's
place.
A great city. Springfield's a great city.
Right.
It's fourth largest in Missouri, and it was the perfect size because it was large enough that there was stuff happening, city-wise, and but small enough that you can get your bearings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a horrible driver. I hadn't driven in years because I didn't have a car in college. I didn't have a car in DC, and Springfield was like a grid. So I got slowly into driving again.
So when you were growing up, were there people you wanted to emulate, or did you have role models?
Yeah, I really got into, again, I started off really into radio. Mm-hmm. And so National Public Radio, if you remember, Neil Conan on the show Talk of the Nation was a great interviewer. I always admired Tim Russert. Mm-hmm. Thought he was, and I think for this job, it's so important to know how to interact with someone, because I do have always a set questions with me. I don't wing it, but there's an art to interviewing. And even to this day, I watch certain people just to kind of get an idea of the exchange. So I like Neil Conan, Tim Russert. I still love Frederica Whitfield on CNN. I think she does a great job. That's like appointment TV for me on weekends, even if I'm just like working around the home. And this is not news, but I always thought that LeVar Burton reading Rainbow was really good on PBS. I feel I was like raised on PBS, and I thought he's so engaging, and the way he delivered was really, that I was drawn to that. And it was nice to see someone of color on TV. That I think that really makes a difference. And so that left an impression on me growing up.
Right. Absolutely. To see someone that you can aspire to be. And so is there any advice you would give young people who are interested in broadcasting?
It's funny because we'll meet interns every now and then, and I'm like, yeah, I'm majoring broadcast here. I'm like, are you sure you want to do it? Yeah, but it's because it's so different now than it was then. Mm-hmm. The advice I give to people is you need to be a good writer, and that goes for broadcast or print. Mm-hmm. Because you're the one presenting, whether it's in a newspaper or on radio or television or online. You need to be able to know how to construct a story and tell a story and know what's important and when to do it. I think you can never get too much writing experience. Also, for broadcast, I see it now, and more with women and young women is I'm stealing from Ted Koppel here, who I used to watch on ABC, but I had read that he had once given the advice of you need to be more than a pretty face. And it sounds sexist in some way, but I also think that a lot of people are dazzled by what they see on TV. And I think a lot of people think, and understandably so, that we just come in and read copy, and reading is part of the job, but you have to know what's going on in there. You have to know what the important facts are and information are. You need to, and when I read scripts every night, I make changes to it. Not because I think it's bad, but when I'm anchoring on a Friday at 5 o'clock, I go through every script and there's no question I make some sort of change. Not because it's necessarily factually wrong, but you need to make it current and suited for the audience. And so you've got to have chops. And I always think and I'll say this now, I mean, the best anchors are really good reporters. And, there are some people who kind of just become anchors. And I feel like you can tell who's really good at what they do because they were reporters for so many years, because that's where you learned the ins and outs and nuts and bolts of what you're doing.
Right.
And I'll give an example. Sorry. Do you remember when the Kirkwood horrible City Hall shooting happened? 2008, maybe? It was February. That was a breaking news story that it was horrible. There were 7 people, I think, shot at City Hall, and it was the craziest thing to happen. It was a national story. And that's not something you just prepare for. And I remember I was working at Channel 5 at the time as a reporter, and I could hear through my earpiece while I was was it Kirkwood, near City Hall, like near Dewey's Pizza, where I was stationed at the time. And I could hear Deanne Lane doing kind of the play-by-play, if you will, of what we knew. And she had her sources and her contacts. And that was a real pro, because she was working the phones and anchoring at the same time. And I remember thinking, wow, that's someone who's totally solid and has got it together. And I remember, watching or listening to Mike Owens through my earpiece, who had been doing this for how many decades. Those are people who know what they're doing, because that just doesn't come to you. It comes through experience and having contacts and sources and just credibility. And I remember looking at them and thinking, like, I want to be like that.
Wow. And pivoting, because that's a serious topic with the Kirkwood shooting, but are there any crazy or fun stories that have happened behind the scenes or on air from your years?
Yeah, I think I'm mentioning a story that was so dark, but one of the great things about my job is doing the fun stuff and the positive stuff, because that's so important, to not just have gloom and doom in a newscast. And when you get to do those positive stories about the community, I think those are what really make a difference. And one more recent one I did was it was during COVID last year. And there was a physician with a pediatric ER physician with SLU, and he had come down with COVID, and he was on a ventilator. He was on like the last resort stuff, like an ECMO machine. His lungs had failed. He was in the hospital for like 4 or 5 weeks. They weren't sure he was going to make it. And his name was Dr. Nadim Qureshi. And he had, impacted so many lives through his career, saving lives. And here was this guy who was about to who could have lost his life. His patients and his staff and his former staff, his former nurse, who I got to know because her son was a St. Louis County police officer. He knew he was shot and killed, but I got to know her through I've kept in touch with her over the past few years. And they organized this awesome welcome home parade for him at his home in Chesterfield. And if you can look it up, it was awesome. And you realize you do have a heart after doing this for so many years when you watch the raw footage of this huge procession and this home in Chesterfield, and you see the Chesterfield police cars, and you're like, oh God, it's, what's going on? Oh, it's actually something good happening. And, because they've got the sirens going on, and you see all these people with awesome signs for Dr. It must have been going on for like 3 miles.
Wow.
And you see this physician, and he's coming out slowly. I mean, he's not 100% recovered. He'd just been out of the hospital for a week, and he starts bawling because he had no idea this was happening. And it was so nice to see so many people from so many walks of lives. And this was an immigrant who had been in the States for, I think, 20, 25 years. Pakistani Muslim family. His wife wore the hijab. And you see him and just break down and say, this just means so much to me, to have my family here, but you're all my family as well. And that meant so much. And I'm watching this raw footage, like at my desk, and I start crying at work because it was just his reaction and everyone's reaction. So that was a great one. Okay. Something else I was going to bring up, it's the stories. That one really touched my heart. But the behind the scenes stuff, I always think is funny because you don't see that. And I remember I was this new reporter at KSDK. I mean, I was, the youngest person there by some distance. And I had just moved to town, and I was living with my parents, and my mom, who thinks I'm still like 12, was insisting that she drop me off to work. And because I worked the mornings at the time. So I had to be at work at like 3:15 in the morning, which, is, what, you're going downtown St. Louis, where are you parking? Da, 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 da. So like for the first month, she was dropping me off at work, and it was so embarrassing. It wasn't embarrassing driving to work because no one, was there, but getting off work at noon, there's Mrs. Huda picking up my mom picking me up like it was like from school. So Frank Cusimano would always, the sports director now, would always give me grief about my mom picking me up from work. And so one day he goes, I just saw your mom, and he was kidding. He's like, I just saw your mom. She wanted me to let you know that she picked up some fruit roll-ups for you, and she taped Hannah Montana for you. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that always stuck with me.
That's so funny. So funny. We're going to show a couple more. Jasmine was so nice, and she provided us so many pictures. They were wonderful.
Oh my gosh.
We're putting up a few on the screen, and we'll turn it over to Susan. These are great, Jasmine.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yes, those are great pictures. We love your wedding picture, and that was a beautiful wedding dress. And we see just some snippets. Of course, you, our member Reva Davis, your former teacher, and of course, we'll talk briefly about Back to School Store in a little bit. Before we leave kind of the behind the scenes stuff, 2 real quick questions. Can you refuse to do a story? Number 1. And number 2, behind the scenes, do you have somebody that does your makeup, your hair? Do you get a clothing allowance, etc.?
I wish, to the latter question, the hair and makeup. But I'll get to the first question, which was a little more serious, which is a good question. And this speaks for everyone. I think the only time someone would not do a story is because there would be a conflict of interest. You want to maintain your independence on some stuff. So if I know someone who's very involved in something, then I'll have to recuse myself, if you will. And I always put out, so, and sometimes I'll pitch a story so, I don't have a dog in this fight, but, I'm related to so-and-so in this story. So you might want to have someone else do it. Or I feel like I'd say that's the only situation I would refuse to do a story. And I think that's for the better, to maintain objectivity. Hair and makeup, no. We do have consultants who tell us what works well for you, and wear this, don't wear that. But yeah, we do that all on our own.
Okay, interesting. Sometimes I'll see the male broadcasters and I think the suit they're wearing, the color looks horrible. And I wonder
yeah.
who's
There's
advising them.
There's no shortage of people though who will like to weigh in on what we're wearing and makeup, hair, especially women. Women are usually the ones who take the that feedback the most. But yeah, I sometimes am, and my husband now is the expert, so he'll weigh in on the same things. So like, why that suit doesn't fit him well? Like I don't know about men's clothing.
So let's shift gears just a little bit to maybe a couple more serious things. When we were talking before we started the music, we were talking about all the crime last night. Are there important issues in our region that you think need to be talked about that either aren't, or you think there should be more coverage from your vantage point?
We were talking before we started this morning about what was going on in the news last night, and we were talking about just things were really out of control. Crime is a huge issue now, and I think it's become more of an issue now than it was in previous months or even years, because of changes that have been going on with the city of St. Louis, and you hear about cuts being made certain areas, including the police department. Crime is the number one issue, I think. Even, yes, a lot of it is happening in the city of St. Louis, but you don't have to live in the city of St. Louis for this to matter to you. It should matter to everyone. And we have the highest, I think it's the largest number of homicides we've had in like 50 years, 2020. And we need to think about people who live and work in the city and people who travel to and from the city, because that matters to us. I think race relations are really important. And I think these issues are being addressed now, but we can't let this go by the wayside, because it's important. And I think when the nation looks at us, I think a lot of people still think of Ferguson when they think of St. Louis. And so that needs to be addressed well. I think we need to think about educational opportunities for children. I think we need COVID, I know, is not as serious of an issue as it was this time last year, but I mean, didn't I just see that we lead? I mean, it's not a good number one to be. I think Missouri has the highest infection rate. I think new infections, like we're leading the country in that. I mean, so we need to get a hold on that issue as well.
Thank you. Since you've had experience working away from St. Louis, is there an advantage to covering the news being from here versus national news?
I think it's certainly, I feel like the more experience, the better. So having left and come back and being from here, certainly you see things in a different way. I think it gives you more institutional knowledge for sure. Having been born and raised here, having been a product of the public school system, and I attended private school too, elementary. I think that perspective helps. I also think that having worked in other cities, you see how St. Louis is viewed. I think.
And how is that?
Well, I think, well, so much has changed over time. You know, St. Louis, remember Missouri, and gosh, so there was one point where Missouri, when it came to elections, we were the bellwether state. You know, we were the ones who, you know, it was kind of cool back then because all the national media would converge on Missouri when there was a presidential election. Like, well, they've always picked the president who would win. Like, we just knew it. Like, I think there were like all but 2 elections that we had picked the president of the United States. And then 2008 happened and Missouri went for McCain. So then like our record was like blown. But, you know, when it comes to, it helps to have that perspective of knowing how we were viewed before and how we're being viewed now. And I think, you know, we were seen as kind of a purple state before because we had Kansas City, St. Louis, which tended to lean blue, and the rest of the state tended to go Republican. But to see, you know, have that perspective back then,
Right.
I think is helpful now. I also think, you know, it's interesting to see how much the city of St. Louis has changed. And I know you know, I hate to bring up the bad stuff about crime, but it's pretty awesome that we now have a mayor who is our first African-American female mayor. That was never that wasn't the case ever before. And we had our first female mayor this last go around.
So let's move to the topic of females just for a couple minutes. And I want to start nationally. You worked at Fox News when Roger Ailes was there. Would you mind commenting on that? What was the environment like? Were you aware of what was going on in that environment?
Yeah,
How did
so
you?
it was, and for anyone who's not familiar with what was going on at Fox News channel, it come out in recent years about the treatment of female employees there. And it was, we're talking about grave, serious issues of sexual harassment that have been going on over a period of time. And with some of the high level staff there on air and behind the scenes, including Roger Ailes, I was aware of some of the stuff that was going on. And I remember my first week there, someone who was of a rather prominent position who had made a inappropriate overture to me. And, you know, I'm, early 20s, you don't know what to do. And I never reported it, but that was prevalent there. Absolutely. I didn't know the depth of it until after I left about what was going on with certain employees, including my boss. But I was absolutely aware of what was going on. And it is not a situation any person, male or female, should have to be subjected to. I'm glad to see he was eventually dismissed, and other people there. But I think that speaks to the workplace culture and the steps. And if I knew that it was going on, a lot of people knew that it was happening. And the steps were not being, I think there was just such a blind eye that, people, it was the culture there. I mean, Bill O'Reilly, Ed Henry, Roger Ailes. I mean, I can name other people behind the scenes. I mean, that's a lot of people. It's unfortunate.
That had to be stressful.
It was stressful. And my immediate supervisor was, it's where the abused becomes the abuser. It was a toxic environment because, people were allowed to work under those conditions. It was, there's the deadline pressure and the adrenaline and the cutthroat nature of already working at a news network. But to add that on top of it made it absolutely, I mean, sometimes I wonder how I did it. But I guess part of it is when you're younger and you don't have that perspective of, you know, should I be speaking up, or should I be tolerating this? Where do I draw the line? You don't know. I mean, I look at people now who are just getting into the business, and you hope they're not having to go through what you went through or what other people went through back then.
Right.
But they definitely did not set an example for the employees there. And I'm glad I got out when I did.
In general, do you think, not just in broadcasting, in general, do you think that the environment for women and the movement forward professionally for women is changing in St. Louis in a positive way?
I think we're definitely seeing an acknowledgement of it. So that's really good. I hope companies and organizations and everything else that there is, people are actually walking the walk, because it's one thing to say that you support women, but then it's another to, you know, we've seen it nationally. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head where people claim to be for women's rights and equality, and then you hear what else is going on. So I hope that that's being done. I think at my workplace, that's not tolerated. I think at the other places in town, first of all, we shouldn't even be, I'm not attacking the question. This shouldn't be an issue like that. We have to like actively be talking about, oh yeah, women are people too.
Right.
I mean, this is so absurd that in 2021, this still exists, but I'm glad it's coming out, and I'm glad people are making a concerted effort to address it.
We agree. Thank you. You've been involved with the Back to School store. You're our honorary chair and have been for years, and we deeply appreciate that. Just real quickly, how'd you get involved in Back to School store?
I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, how did I get involved? I think I was contacted by the Back to School store to ask if I wanted to be involved and on this great event. And I know at my previous workplace and now we send a camera every year to cover it because it's such a great event. So I think I was just contacted to be part of it because I didn't have a direct connection other than knowing certain people like Amy Fenster Brown, who I think is like the funniest person in the world. But I was so drawn to it and totally sold on it when I took part on it. And then, you know, I should put out there, I'm not the one doing the heavy lifting. You know, you guys just have me show up and say some great things, but everything I say about it is from the heart because I see what the organization does and what it does for these kids. And you're all well aware of what it does for these kids and the labor that goes into it. So I've come back every year, and last year obviously was different because of COVID, but I have to say, I mean, I do a lot of stuff in the community, but this one's is really near and dear to my heart because I see so much support that goes into helping these families. And you know, I think about my first day of school and what first day of school means to everyone. And I think about all the opportunities I was given. And I think about my parents who had nothing. And I think about how important it is to provide other people opportunities and to give them the ability to start and do something and be successful. I mean, with all the awful news happening, this is great. I think it's a great opportunity to help these kids. And it's like, isn't it like close to 1,000 or more than 1,000 people served each go around? I mean, that's awesome.
2,000. 2,000. Thank you.
2,000. I was off by 1,000.
We
50%.
appreciate that. And thank you, because that really means a lot. And given all that, how do you think you have made a difference in the world?
oh gosh, I don't know how I've made a difference, but I try to make a difference. I mean, I recognize that professionally, I have a job that a lot of people would kill to have, and I don't take it for granted. I also don't take for granted the opportunities I was given growing up. You know, my parents who are the American dream. You know, they worked their way up, and my dad became a doctor. Like how, you know, and he came from a village that had like hardly running water, and you know, they both didn't have parents, and I'm so grateful to have had opportunities. And I'd say the same about my school. I went to a fantastic school district, a public school district where you had everyone there, and all types, not just diverse in terms of skin color, but socioeconomic status. We had kids from everywhere. And I know people think Ladue School District, oh, it's high dollar. We had all types of people represented there. And we had kids from the city coming in. We had, you know, it covers like 9 different municipalities. I feel like I'm making a difference because I want to be able to give people to know that there are opportunities for them as well. And maybe they didn't come in the same way. I mean, it was more readily accessible for me, but for the back to school store, there are people who do support you and who do care for you. And other organizations that I am involved with as well. You know, Guns and Hoses. I mean, that's a different part of the community, but you know, these are people whose family members lost their lives as a police officer, a firefighter. And you know what? There is a community that backs you and wants your kids to go to college and want you to be able to pay the bills and pay mortgage and be able to still move on. I think that matters. So with all the awful stories that I've brought up with news, there's still good stuff happening out there. And I want to be able to, I think it's something that with all the changes and going on in my life, I'm still true to that. And I haven't forgotten where I came from.
No, and it's, you're very humble about it. And it's really a beautiful quality that you have, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm gonna switch here a little bit. We've got some questions in the chat, and others may have questions. So if you do, please either put your hand up and I'll look for you, or put it in the chat. So let me start real quickly here with the first one. What has been your most stressful situation while broadcasting?
Yesterday. I'm just kidding. And then yesterday I would have said like Friday.
That's from Maryland.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think one of the most stressful situations is, I think when you have so much coming at you at once and you really don't, there's some situations you can't prepare for. I would say, like, in terms of news stories, I think post 9/11, when I was at National Public Radio and I had just arrived, and having to adjust to a totally different environment and booking guests, and as an intern, I think that was just like such a foreign concept to me. And trying to track down the families of these firefighters and police officers, and they didn't know where they were, or, you know, it was just ultimate chaos. And also, I was in a different environment to begin with, because I didn't know these people, like, who I was working with in Washington. I was all by myself. I'd say that was one of the most stressful, but it was a learning experience as well, because I learned. So there's the positive out of it. You learned how to approach these families. You learned how to work with other people. So I think it was like getting acclimated to 800 different things at once. I would say that would be one of them. I would say the DC riots, January 6th, was also stressful. I was here in St. Louis, but I think all of us can say, no matter where you were, who you are, doesn't matter whether you are, you know, in the industry or not. That was so, I was nervous. I was really nervous because when you see Wolf Blitzer or Nora O'Donnell not knowing what's going on, but gosh, they handled themselves with grace. I had no idea where that was going to go. And so I was just like, from a, you know, just little old me standpoint, but, you know, professionally having to cover it from a St. Louis standpoint, that made me really nervous. And thank goodness we didn't see what could have happened.
What makes me nervous are the people who say that was just a typical day at the Capitol.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be political here, but to hear people say that that happened, let's move on.
Right.
It's that day is going to be singed in my brain.
Thank you. Diane Friedman, you have a question. Your hand's up. Okay. So let me go to Ellen. Question is, how do you decide what is news that belongs on the air and what doesn't?
That's a good question. Those decisions are made from an editorial standpoint, even before I walk in the door. To kind of walk you through the day, we have meetings in the early morning, in the late morning, in the afternoon, and they decide what warrants coverage and what doesn't. And a lot of it is based on what affects the community, what do we need to alert the community about, what's important. And not everything can make a half an hour or an hour-long newscast, but we think about what affects our viewers the most. And some things don't make it on the air, but they will make it online. And there's a huge audience for that as well. Also, TV. So it's a visual medium also. What can we shoot? Sometimes we say this is a better newspaper story than it is a television story, just because we need to have a visual there.
That makes sense. Okay. We have your former teacher with a quick question. Reva.
Oh my goodness.
It's almost, I'm in DC. Thanks to modern technology, I'm able to join you all this morning. And I guess Ellen bringing us to DC those few years ago has embedded my mind and changed how I work, how I think. And I have to thank National Council of Jewish Women for that experience. And of course, I love it. And Jasmine was a dream child. Oh. We even had character ed that one year, so I got her extra time. She was on my Science Olympiad team, so I got her extra time. And I'm just so proud of what she's done. And I love following my students. And it's been just a blessing to see her.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reva. I was so excited to see you here. It's always a pleasure to see Reva every year at the back to school store. It is so nice to be. We have like an annual picture we take every year, and then we'll run into each other at Ladue Pharmacy. And they're like, who are these two random people taking a selfie together?
Yeah.
But I was so fortunate to have you as a teacher, as a Science Olympiad coach, and just a friend over the years. It's so nice.
Well, and I'm very much a public school teacher, and I love the way you mentioned public school teaching, because I really am a firm believer in what we can do as a public school educational facility.
I agree 110%. And this is someone who was a product of private, as I said, and public schools. And my sibling, I'm the youngest of 5. We all started off in private schools, and we joke that my parents ran out of money by the time they got to the 4th kids, but it was the best thing ever, because there are things you get out of a public school that you don't get in a different setting. And I was so fortunate to have teachers like Reva Davis who really embraced the students. And I don't think I would have, I'm confident I would not be where I am today were it not for my public school education. Because, I grew up with parents who, and who could blame them? They didn't have anything, and they thought that, becoming a doctor was the way to make it. And yes, that is a way to make it. But they also, through Ladue School District, I was really able to hang on to my dream. And to have these instructors and coaches and still keep in touch with them over the years means so much, to have that support network. I say it like, I even said it at the Emmys several years ago when I won. I'm like, I'm so grateful for my education at a young age to be able to have these people really believe in me.
We need you to do a billboard for public education, Jasmine. That's really, that's a beautiful testament. Reva, thank you. The last very, very quick question goes to Joan Lipkin. Joni?
Oh, thanks, Susan. Jasmine, I'm enjoying you so much. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
And I watch you all the time. So you had mentioned that decisions are pretty much made in these meetings when you come in. And I think it's more challenging than ever to try to pitch a news station and to try and figure out who to try and talk to besides just sending a press release. And I bet a lot of us on the call would appreciate it if you could.
Oh, sure.
Give us some
I think
tips.
that's great, because whether it's NCJW or any organization or individual, it helps to have to know, to be guided in the right direction, and to know and sometimes, it's not one size fits all. A story that works at 8 a.m. on Fox News in the morning might be better suited for them than at 9 or 10 p.m. And so sometimes, when you're pitching a story, it's good to think about what's the best audience for this? Is this good for the morning, afternoon, evening? Is this a visual story? Can we shoot anything? Is this about an event coming up? Is this about a spotlight on an individual? Is this more of, as we would say, an evergreen story? Can it be shot next week, next month? Or is there, what's the urgency behind it? And Joan, you're well versed. I know you know about this stuff well, but I think that's a good way of, sending something to the, first of all, sending something to the assignment desk, which the email is on our website, is a good way to start. But I think being able to say the who, what, when, where, and why, and kind of why you think it is something that warrants coverage. And I think, if it's something that affects the whole community and it's newsworthy, as we would say, I think it is a good candidate for something in any newscast. But I think knowing contacting a station and saying, you can even call the assignment desk and say, this is what I'm thinking. Where do you think, or do you think this would work for one of for your station? And I think once you get a person, or even sending an email to guide you and point you in the right direction, that's the way to go.
Just to send things to assignment editor.
I would send it. You can send it to me too, as well. And I can, I can be a good filter on that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Good advice. Thank you, Jasmine, so much. Lisa, back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine, for taking the time this morning to be with us. And to show our appreciation, we're going to sponsor a child in your name for the back to school.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And
I appreciate it. And I appreciate everything this organization does. I'm so mood, I mean, just to see how you reach out to the community, and there's a real sense of community from this organization, what it does and the difference it tries to make, with children or, at the Capitol. I recognize and I see from a distance what you do, and you really set an example.
Thank you. Thank you. And hopefully when we all are back in person for our regular back to school store, we'll see you there.
Yeah. So is that TBD, or is that what's going on?
Hopefully next year. This year, we're kind of doing it in a safer way where we will be delivering the things that are needed to the kids, right to the agencies. So
First.
yeah, hopefully next summer, we will have our standard back to school store. So
I always see the items. I'm like, those backpacks are awesome. I want one, like they're like glitter or something.
oh, the kids love those. They go for those.
Yeah.
No. So, and as a programming note, we have our Live at Lester's. It's this Thursday at 6 o'clock, and that is supporting back to school store. So if you're available, Jasmine, so you can come and see people in person, and you can come and you either play poker or you can just hang out, and there's awesome prizes to win, and you can register at NCJWSTL.org, or you can pay at the door. And our next coffee talk is July 27th. We will be back with one of our favorite guests, Harley Hammerman. And we have a quick poll that's going to come up on your screen. Just take a second to fill it out. We appreciate your feedback for Coffee Talk. And thank you again, Jasmine.
Oh, Lisa, I'm so glad I got to do it. And I know my schedule's crazy, but I'm glad we finally were able to make it work.
I was concerned. I thought, oh my gosh, what if something's happening right at the time when you need to come on?
No, not in the morning. So yeah, so we're good.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for coming here this morning and spending time with us.
Thank you. Stay well, everybody.